This is the Sales Development Podcast, hosted by David Delaney, powered by Tenbound. My name is James Bodden, with the pleasure of introducing episode 193, featuring Jason Serota, Head of Growth Business Development North America at Adobe. Jason and David jump right into this value-packed episode, talking about how Jason ended up at Adobe and got into sales development as they kick off this episode that's focused on the challenges of modern outbound. The episode gets rolling as David asks Jason about the pros and cons of being acquired by a larger company like Adobe. Look, many listeners out there may go through a merger acquisition at some point. Some really great advice is given by Jason here. At the 15-minute mark, David gets tactical on how Jason tracks his team's progress and how he uses different reports to drive success in different areas. Super insightful and valuable information here for all of you SDR leaders. The episode rolls right along as Jason and David discuss how Jason trains his team and ups their industry knowledge. Another hot topic for all of you SDR leaders out there on how to get your team familiarized with the industry that they're calling, emailing, and reaching out to on a daily basis. The episode rolls right along as David asks Jason about the future of his team at Adobe and how he is going to navigate outbound going forward in the future. Look, this is a constantly changing landscape. Jason is somebody who is at the forefront of modern outbound, and this is a value-packed episode. Any SDR leader has to tune in to episode 193. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to leave us a rating. Head over to tenbound.com to keep track of what's going on with everything Tenbound, and enjoy episode 193 of the Sales Development Podcast featuring Jason Serota, Head of Growth Business Development North America at Adobe.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. I am joined today by Jason Serota, Head of Growth Business Development for North America at Adobe. Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show. Excited to collaborate. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the show. The perspective, that you bring working at a bigger company and running, the North America, especially when it comes to outbound. Outbound is a huge topic in the sales development community. It's a nut that everyone's trying to crack, and it's tough. It's not something that you can master overnight. So I want to dig into that. Jason, before we do though, how did you get into sales development and end up over at Adobe?
Very interesting, maybe unique story possibly, but my original background was I was a TV producer, TV executive for Disney with ABC Studios. And then I had a career change about 4 or 5 years ago. I was kind of basically selling stories to networks and buyers around in the entertainment industry, and really wanted to make a sales transition to technology, and got an opportunity to be a BDR for Magento Commerce and helped expand that company and grow their outbound sales strategy, and then got promoted. And then we were acquired by Adobe and became their e-commerce product of choice, which has been incredible. And then got promoted to run different departments within different business units for business development within Adobe within the past couple of years. So it's been incredible to see just the transition of the company and just kind of how our approach to market has been pretty incredible.
That is really amazing. So what was it like to go from, I'm assuming, a smaller to mid-sized company and then being subsumed into this larger company?
There's definitely pluses and minuses. It really depends on kind of what you want. And I loved it. Being acquired by a company is definitely, not always easy. It's just, learning how to adapt to change, learning how to adapt to new leadership in terms of, restructuring how you fit into the company. But then, it came with a lot of big pluses, honestly, in terms of having so many allies and having such an amazing global brand has been super helpful and really helping me learn and grow in terms of how do we grow e-commerce and, other business units at scale to even more to the next level. So it's been fun just collaborating with an even larger marketing department in a larger, sales operations department, and kind of how we all work together on the same mission. So it's been a fun experience.
Okay, so that's a good context. So tell me about the mission. When you came in, now, you've got to put together the strategy for outbound. What was your mission, to accomplish? And then how did you go about starting to think about going outbound, with the brand?
Yeah. So I guess to give everyone context, we were very much, I would say, when we were just a startup and just Magento Commerce, very lucky, e-commerce was on the rise and it was it still is a very hot industry, but it was a very hot product. So a lot of our stuff, I wouldn't say it wasn't 100% living and breathing on inbound leads and coming in, but I would say we were just starting to touch the surface as we were growing as a company with outbound. And we were growing so big that, we needed to do outbound to be able to hit our new goals. So I was kind of help leading that mission and the new strategy of how do we go about doing this in terms of growing certain, working with marketing. In my opinion, I think not just, usually you think of outbound, which I'll get into more, is, totally separate from marketing. And I think I totally disagree with that. And I think how do you leverage them and work with them as an ally and not worry about attribution? Because I think that's a huge thing that might slow businesses down. And how do you work with them for them to attain their goals and our goals at the same time? So I think the biggest thing specifically in business development, to answer the second part of the question, is, it's all about process. Yes, I wanted sales strategy. I think the biggest thing is getting sales development representative SDRs and BDRs to think more like a marketer, and not only on like educating and communicating and informing different prospects, but I think more on the process side. And I think the biggest problems in front of us when you think about sales leaders managing outbound today, I think BDRs can be very lost and disorganized and get overwhelmed by either an account list or work slower and efficient of knowing like how much time do I spend on personalization, or how do we enable BDRs to actually be creative or challenge them to take a risk. Those are some of the biggest problems that I think in kind of the system we created was, and it sounds so simple, but is really cloning the process that marketing had set for the past few years, is leveraging campaign codes. And then just for the viewers who can just to kind of give update on what campaign codes are, it's basically just a way, a certain specific like word or phrase, depending on how you want to track it, if it's based on like location or idea or product, that you tag to each contact or lead that you're working on, just to track, what are the results? Like how many meetings have you set based on that idea? Or just like how marketing would do it, based on the money they spent on a certain campaign idea, they want to track, what are the results? How much pipeline is being given? How many sales are closed based on that idea? And I kind of clone that for outbound, and it's been super effective. So I'm excited to share more on kind of how that process works.
Got it. Okay. So a few things. One is you look at yourself as sort of a partner with the marketing department because they've already done so much work. And a lot of times it seems in sales development that we just don't even look at what they're doing. It's like we're our own little island, and so you've really leveraged that. And then with the codes, is it essentially that they're doing all these different marketing activities on people that are in the system, and then they're tagging those campaigns on the contact record. And so you can see that. And you cloned that in the sales development environment. Is that right?
That is right. So it's in essence just like a marketing department, but they have like the funding and, they're able to spend money on an idea at scale. And let's just say like they're running a LinkedIn campaign, anything for part of that campaign would be tagged that came from that origination would be tagged with that LinkedIn campaign code for that specific ad or campaign they're running. So very similarly, the one thing that I love about this is it's really getting BDRs to be creative and get invested in their own ideas. So basically with our teams is we'll have everyone responsible for creating their own idea, and we'll create a campaign code just for that idea. And then anytime they're going after something that's centered around that idea, they'll tag it, that contact or lead, in that campaign, and then they'll create their own outreach sequence that's associated with that messaging. And then they can track it, just like marketing, they can track the amount of, and marketing, technically marketing qualified leads that come in, but it's definitely outbound qualified leads that come in, and see how much pipeline they're getting. And the best part about this is it's really low risk. It's a way to get better visibility. I think more organic collaboration between the BDRs and their managers. It also gives BDRs a way to, invest in their own idea and more direction, because I think BDRs, when you're given, like, say you're assigned an account list and you're outbound, you're not like, where do I even start? And it's how do I even focus my day? So it gives them a lot of direction and focus to be like, today I'm just going to focus on my one or two campaign ideas and really getting comfortable getting in a flow, talking that language. So let's just say the idea is based around an industry, then they're constantly talking that industry language for the next few weeks instead of just a random list that, going one by one, they're getting, repetition kind of sticks. So by repeating that language in conversation, understanding their buyers that much more, they're able to have better results. So that's kind of the theory behind it, besides giving them structure and focus. But it also gives them visibility. So it's an opportunity to develop their own copywriting skills, creating their own, sequence and sales loss or outreach, depending which word you're using, and be creative and kind of think outside the box. With low risk, it kind of forces, organic collaboration amongst the team as well. You're doing a team collaboration as well.
It really is. And it's syncing with marketing. So how do you structure it from your level? Say you're going into the month or you're going into the quarter, and your overall plan is to go outbound to a certain cohort or a certain industry. How do you think about planning it, and then how do you get it down to having each of them running their own campaigns?
So what I'll ask of them is, anytime I want them to be running at least 2 to 3 at a time. One could be a full team one idea, and then 2 could be their ideas, and really thinking about first pitching. So pretend like they're pitching an idea either to the team or to me, and really thinking about, like, what about these types of accounts will be successful, and what does the evidence support this idea? Like, what is your hypothesis? So in terms of, it's a great way to get them to get practice forecasting and saying, based on this evidence, I'm predicting this much. I have this goal that it will drive this many results, just like marketing would. Like they set goals like, we're hoping to drive this many leads, inbound based on this much money spent on this campaign. So similarly, based on evidence, maybe they figured out, based on reporting or certain types of companies. I think the more specific, the better you can be. And it doesn't have to be a huge list. I think the more, just like, personalization is key nowadays. So I think even if the campaign is just 15 to 20 companies just for that one idea, I think it's well worth it. But it's just a way better way to get them to, one, be more efficient, and 2, I think just be more creative. And a lot of the ways in terms of how that aligns with marketing is these ideas are not backed by money internally. So there's a lot of low risk involved. And let's just say we notice, one of the BDR SDR's ideas ends up being super successful. Now we can, let's put some money behind it, and we can collaborate with marketing and say, hey, this idea is working really well for us. Show them the evidence to support it. And then let's fund this by scale. And maybe it's a successful campaign for marketing. Think about it as like a way to test out ideas with low risk in a way.
Got it. And so what's the cadence like for you then? Is it sort of a quarterly thing where they'll come in and pitch you, the ideas for the next 3 months? Is it a monthly thing? Is it bi-weekly? How do you roll out the campaigns with the team once they're, pitching them and you approve of what they're doing?
Yeah, I would say it's every few weeks. So, in an ideal perfect situation, they're running 2 to 3 at a time. So let's just say every 3 weeks they would add a new one if it's the last one. And it really depends. Like, say if you're doing one that's only, 15 companies is involved in that list based on that idea, then maybe it won't last as long. But it really depends, because I want them, the pipe, like in terms of like their outreach, I want it to be constantly be them to come up with new ideas so it doesn't just stagger out. So I would say every 3-4 weeks, maybe they would pitch a new idea to add to it. And this is more of, talking about in our one-on-ones and team meetings and collaborating it. So that's a big focus. Usually my one-on-ones in team meetings, it's really talking about strategy. I'm really talking about what's working, what's not, what trends are you noticing? And, my favorite thing about this in terms of like biggest takeaway from this podcast, I feel, is the morale and motivation besides, the results. And I think we've seen a huge increase in KPIs and they're developing their skills and hitting their goals. But I think the motivation and morale has been incredible. I think people love, they're going to work that much harder if they invest in their own idea because they want it to succeed. When you create something on yourself, like for yourself, you're going to put everything you want into it. So they're going to be that much more motivated for their campaign and working outbound to succeed. And honestly, it's a big plus too, in terms of another thing in collaborating with marketing is, let's just say, and this is a little off topic, but related in terms of how do we sync with marketing is in terms of career growth. So most BDRs and SDRs, not every single one wants to go to sales. That's just realistic. And there's a good portion of them who want to be marketers. So think about this as a time, to test an idea, build your portfolio out and really show what you can do. So I kind of use an opportunity as like, hey, if you want to go to marketing, like come up with a great idea. Let's find a successful one that you're working on and show them what you can do. And it's almost like, there's proof in the pudding that what you're doing in terms of demand generation. You came up with your own idea, it's successful. And then also, so let's just say they transition to marketing, get that role. Now we have somebody, an ally in place who knows how to work with us in the same process. So it's kind of like we're building that process and aligning with them as well.
It's a fantastic opportunity for them if that's what they want to get into, right? Because they can actually, it's almost like a audition.
Exactly. Exactly.
If that's what they want to do, right? It can go in a lot of different directions. And so from a reporting perspective, since you've got this system in place and they're running the campaigns, are you able to report on it and kind of see what's working and what's not based on the codes and how they're tracking?
So anything, and that's a specific, you have to, depending on what CRM you're using, if you're using Salesforce, then you can create a specific report, with anything that's tagged in the campaign code. You can see the amount of leads or contacts that are in it and the number of opportunities or meetings that come from it, as well as closed bookings as well, and seeing like how much ASV pipeline is created from that specific idea or campaign, as well as like what stage of opportunities, how many do you have, that are converted to an opportunity, but in what stage they're in. So it's a really great way to see visually, like, I came up with this idea, it resulted in 200K in ASV pipeline for sales. And then we can show that to marketing and they can say, well, this is incredible. Let's see if we can do this at scale and invest in this.
Amazing. It might be the next big idea. And so do you report to marketing there or sales or
operations? We report to sales, but I think it's crucial just aligning yourself with marketing. I think is obviously that's a big topic all the time. And I think thinking of yourselves as allies to them is super, super important. I think a lot of times when you think about inbound and outbound and BDRs and SDRs, it's all about, the argument is, attribution and marketing, will we source that? And then BDRs say, no, I actually source that. So I think it's, and how do you solve that issue is really truly aligning with them and working with them on outbound and thinking about is outbound is a way to, build evidence for marketing ideas to make them successful. And I think that's a great way to do it as well. And in terms of seeing what's working and not, and vice versa, looking at ideas from their side and seeing what's working and not. So I think it's a way better way to, work together versus worry about like credit, I would say, because that's always, I think, a hot topic, that people love to talk about. But I think it's more important to team up with them. And then looking at the reporting, the evidence will really speak for themselves. I'm a big data person. I think looking at the data and seeing like, what BDRs and SDRs are doing and seeing what works versus you can show the evidence to see, it's such a low risk. So you can show the evidence saying we should invest in this versus marketing spending something on that it's not proven yet, So it's a great way to get them to have their own ideas and drive their results even more.
I love it. And so let's talk about the, enablement process or, training and coaching for them. So as they're coming up with the campaigns, they're running the campaigns, how do you think about, supporting them and coaching them once you get the data back and you're starting to see trends?
Yeah, in terms of coaching and enablement, I think we're constantly giving feedback to improve the process. So looking at let's say they create a sequence in, sales ops or outreach, and that's a great way to really develop their copywriting skills and writing skills and looking at the, the response rate and seeing, A/B testing. And I think that's a huge part of it is adapting. And if something's not working, let's change something up. And I think just improving that specifically to these campaign ideas. And I think in terms of working with coaching on it is really focusing on them to have more of a, when they're doing outbound specifically, how do they do it where like you're familiarizing yourself with your prospects and personas and making sure it's not coming off too strong in your outbound campaigns? Because I think sometimes that can be challenging when we're training and coaching is it can come off when you're trying to sell something and you don't want to come off that you're trying to sell somebody something and more trying to help them, because I think that's really like the most fun thing about it is if, people buy from people who they like first, but also from people who they can trust. And I think the key is how, when you're running these campaigns, like, how do you find the trust built within that prospect? Like, that's a question I always want them to think, and always have a reason for reaching out. Don't just call to say, I'm trying to sell you something or calling about this product. You got to always have a reason for calling, and a real reason to help them and help them achieve their goals. So I think in terms of enablement, and I know in terms of having the perspective that you don't just have that one product in your bag to sell is a huge thing I always talk about with my team, just because you want them, when you're asking these questions and asking the BDRs to focus, is really ask them about their business or their company, and the product you're trying to, help sell to them is not top of mind, and that's okay. How do you provide that customer service and customer experience is always number one. So let's just say their problem is not a problem we can solve right now. Then, how do we help them solve that problem? Maybe it's a partner's product, can help solve that problem. Let's introduce them to one of our partners, because trust me, once you build these long-term relationships, then they'll come back to you when they're ready. So that's a huge thing we talk about.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's an urgency, to outbound, and, got to get them on the line, got to set up a meeting, get a SQL or, whatever, like whatever the metric is to set a meeting. But at the same time, there's sort of that outreach fatigue, that the prospects are just like, there's so many messages coming at them.
Yeah.
And, your approach to building a longer term relationship is really the way to, add value and introduce and go outbound, but it takes time. And that's sort of, how do you balance the urgency of needing to set meetings and build pipeline with the long-term approach like that?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I think with that, in terms of like, how do you prioritize that? I think, well, first, over time, it will, as you plant seeds and build your pipeline, if like you're a brand new hire, I think as you're planting seeds and building the pipeline, it will catch up. So naturally, you'll get meetings for the ones you planted early on. That's one thing. But also in terms of seeing what to prioritize or not, I think that's where the campaigns are helpful. That's why it gives them focus and direction, is like, right now, let's focus on these specific campaign ideas. And then you can always, in terms of if they're not ready to talk now, you can always tag those in a specific way to say that maybe they weren't ready to talk about this specific product, but their biggest problem right now is this. And you introduce them to a partner, and you want to check back in, just saying 3 months later, hey, how's that problem going? Was that solved? Was it helpful for you? It's almost like another reason to check back in. And it's, you're saying you are that resource to solve all their problems, and not just the mindset of, I'm just trying to sell them one item, but a resource to help them grow. And I think that's my favorite part about sales development, is really helping businesses grow and succeed, because that's what it's all about. And I think if you provide that customer service mentality, then you will be successful. And your feedback and your communication from customers and prospects is all going to be positive if you really have that mentality.
I love that. And that's so true. So, you're essentially going around and offering support, offering help, whether it's Adobe or another solution right now. It's coming at it from the point of view that it's almost like you're a consultant. If you need something, we want to make that happen for you. And it could be us right now. And if it is, we'll set up a meeting. And so if you're getting, your team in place, you've got these recruits, right? And a lot of people earlier in their career that don't have a lot of experience, in the industry that they're calling on. How do you take them from not knowing much about the people and the industry and getting them to the point where they can actually add value and, build those relationships?
Yeah, that's a great question. And then that's where I would say, in terms of your research, and really that's something I hone in with my team, is really constantly block off time in your calendar, add in, especially for new hires, and really looking at your ideal customer profile, in looking at like what types of industries and customers are the perfect fit. That's always huge. So I think learning your ICP is one of the biggest things that when we're, training new hires. And product is so important, but I feel like learning your ICP, this product there's just so much, and it can be features and functionality, is a lot to learn in such a short period of time when you're onboarding. So I feel like really focusing on the industries and personas first will really help them be more successful, because they know how to talk that language. So doing their research, understanding that industry by reading different articles. So having my team constantly be up to date and reading what are the, trends in that specific industry and sharing that with us. What are you noticing companies are needing? So I think learning to talk that language is more of just practice, and learning from your mistakes is one thing. And I think that's a huge thing that I think leadership and what I like to communicate, it's okay to fail and make mistakes. So in the beginning, if they don't know how to speak that language, that's okay. And learning from that is super important in growing and developing those skills. But also, shadowing other people within the team. I think learning from them in terms of how do you talk that language is also another way. But research and practice. I think that's just practicing and honing your craft, and learning what's important to specific industries is always something that is important.
It's so great. And it's such a great entry point. If they decide to stick with this industry, or they decide to stick with Adobe for a long time, because they can use those skills. They're just building a foundation to get into sales or get into marketing or customer success or all these different things. So it's a great foundation, to start with that approach, it seems.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's interesting how you talk about like developing their skills and getting it into, in terms of career growth, getting into anything they want to do next. If it's sales, marketing, let's say customer success, is really thinking, people always worry about like, what's your next step? Am I going to like sales? And there's like that fear involved. And I think even you take away that fear is, everyone's going to have a unique journey and bring that unique skill set to that next role. I've seen a lot of people go to customer success and then they go to sales, and they're some of the best salespeople, and vice versa. Maybe you're in sales and you have that sales experience and go to customer success. So I think you're going to bring, no matter what step you make next, this is all going to be, honing those skills, and you're going to have something that maybe someone didn't have that unique experience that you had. And it's going to be really helpful in that journey.
100%. And so, next steps, as far as what are you working on now? What's the new strategy? What's coming up in the future for the team?
For the team, so what we're trying to do is a lot of these campaigns, we're trying to scale out this process even further, I think, across the business unit. And I think that's something that, is just taking time. But one of my favorite things is trying to figure out, honestly, like with obviously the hot topic of COVID, is figuring out, events coming back. Are they still going to be virtual? Because I know obviously there's a big virtual burnout right now, but I think there are people who still want to do virtual. It just depends on, what your prospect is wanting. So I think the biggest thing is, how do you add value? And really talking about our customers and focusing on our current customers' stories and how are they connected to prospects. And then that's a huge thing, because I think people buy from who they trust. So for example, let's just say your current customer is a manufacturing company and they work with a handful of distribution companies. Then really talking about the story of your current customer who's a manufacturer to these distribution companies, and just educating them on it and seeing if that's something that would be helpful for them, or learning more about how they're doing, what they're doing and accomplishing their goals. So, when you discuss the stories that there's built-in trust with people you're trying to connect with, it's that much more effective. And that's a huge, huge priority for us right now.
I love it. Well, this has been so interesting. Jason, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we got to get you on again and do another deep dive on this. This is an amazing program. And if folks want to connect with you, learn more, I'm sure that there's opportunities on the team. What's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. Always open to talk, especially about outbound. That's definitely my passion. I love kind of coming up with new ideas and ways to stand out in outbound. So always happy to connect.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll definitely connect with you on LinkedIn. And Jason, thanks for coming on the Sales Development Podcast.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Development Podcast, the only audio forum 100% focused and dedicated to sales development, with your host, David Delaney. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube and take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes. Your support makes our show possible. If you are struggling with your sales development program, contact us at tenbound.com for a no-obligation exploratory call. Again, that's tenbound.com.